Bear with me one second. My name is Ted McBride, and you're listening to Talk with Ted, not Common Ground. No Mark Shurtleff today, so just Talk with Ted. There we go. Talk with Ted number 31. And I think we're back up on the airwaves, right, Kristen? Mm-hmm. Back on the radio waves. I don't think I've been on the local AM airwaves for a few weeks now because the station had been struck by lightning 3 or 4 weeks ago, so we were off the air just doing some Facebook shows. Last week I struggled with some technology. I know it was a bit of a failure for the radio. It was a disaster for the radio, but I traveled down to Las Vegas and attempted to interview my cousin Jeff McBride, world-famous magician Jeff McBride, and I think we may have successfully aired a small portion of that, but I got to visit with him, and he's an interesting and fascinating guy, and we'll have Jeff back on without the video is what I've decided. The video's too distracting with him. He's
doing card tricks all day.
Great with the cards, great with the card tricks. The video is too distracting for him, and so when I have him on next, maybe no video. Yeah. But my cousin is a fascinating man, magician, teacher, lecturer, lives down there in Las Vegas, and I had the pleasure and luxury of going to a show of his just a few weeks ago. And my cousin Jeff has never really been anything but a magician, and he did my kindergarten birthday party. And he's basically risen to fame. He's performed at all the casinos in Las Vegas and on television all the time, and he's one of the top magicians in the world. Well, he's got a magic school in Las Vegas as well, and he had performs once a month at a hookah bar called the Olive in the suburbs there.
It's like a big family room.
Big family room is right. And a couple of months ago, I told Jeff before I was going to have him on the show that I wanted to come down and see the show, and he told me this back in February. No, you can't come right now to February's show. No, you can't come. I thought, that's a little odd. I know he's a busy guy, but he really kind of gave me the strong arm. You can't come right now. So I invited myself again in May, just a couple of weeks ago, and with no resistance, went down there with you, Alan. Yeah. We had a wonderful time. But it was quite an experience because there was one main stage that the magic was at, but there was also close-up magic all around at the different bars and tables, and it didn't take long for me to realize that my cousin's magic show had quite a bit to do about me.
Yeah, it did.
And it was a little bit of the ultimate punk, if you will, because
I'd say it's a sucker punch.
A bit of a punk, and I'll get right to the point. After the show, the after show, we went out to a late night dinner, early breakfast with Jeffrey, a few other famous magicians that were with him, and the cast of the whole show, which was about 25 people. And some of those people that were the cast, the magicians, sat down next to me at my couch while I was watching the show on stage, and they knew things about me that seemed kind of magical, if you will. Right. But it was quite the show that my cousin pulled on me because he just incorporated a lot of things in my life into the choreographed magic of his life, which was taking place all around us, including he told me, Alan, this is where I had to figure it out, that there'd be 6 famous magicians sitting down with us at this at the table that we were at. And of course, shortly thereafter, some people showed up and sat down. That seemed to be nothing but casual observers and patrons. And they weren't. They were role players and magicians. And
it was like a murder mystery.
It was. And then about an hour and a half in or 2 hours in, the lights went on right to our left, and my cousin introduced Chris Angel, the famous, I call him the rock star magician.
He does. That's what he is.
Chris Angel was to our left. And so that was great, and I've now spent too much time talking about Jeff McBride, but I know that since the folks didn't hear the show last week, I'd have to fill in a little bit, but like I said, we'll get Jeff back on. This week, I've got a magician of a different sort, a gentleman by the name of Stuart Goffman, who's going to be calling in shortly, and Stuart's the creator of I don't know if you call it reality TV program, I guess it is called that, called Addiction Unplugged. And Stuart's a New Jersey guy, I think, living down in Florida now. He's got experience in the past with running rehabs, drug rehabilitation clinics. I think he got out of that business about 6 years ago and has since followed a passion of producing a television program that, and he may be calling in right now. We're going to put him on hold. A television program that follows stories of lives of people dealing with addiction. And I know from speaking with Stuart, he wanted to do something different than sort of the intervention shows that we see in that model intervention that people have been doing now for maybe 20, 25 years. And there's been television program intervention that's been on for, I think, over 15 years. And Stuart and his group, their goal is to create a sort of new type of program that looks at addiction from a variety of different angles, and I think including the angle of post-drug use, integration back into society, housing, the effect of criminal records on people, and I think a whole new take and look at drug addiction, drug treatment, and the army of people that are out there trying to help bring some peace to this national war that we have on ourselves here. Speaking of wars, it was Memorial Day this past weekend.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Lovely, little cold, little rainy. And I always find Memorial Day a little bit of a, certainly the bittersweet holiday,
Yeah.
right? And I do quite a bit on LinkedIn. I see a lot of good things on LinkedIn, and you see the sad pictures on LinkedIn of the widows or widowers of those lost in military service on their knees at the graveyard, putting flowers at the tomb. And of course, that's what it's all about. And embracing your family, embracing these great freedoms and privileges that we have living in this great country of ours. But it's a challenging holiday. And on top of the reflection on all of those who lost their lives in service of our great country, I learned over this past weekend that prior guest on our show, Ginger Johnson, a 3-time cancer survivor who was on the program back in January, succumbed to cancer over the weekend. And I know her memorial service, I think, was this morning. But Ginger was in her early 40s, a mother, just one of the most inspirational people I've ever met. I interviewed her right here in this studio just a few months ago, and that interview changed my life, and she really changed a lot of people's lives. And so again, a little bit of a bittersweet weekend. Before I had my cousin Jeff on the program, a few weeks before that, I had Alima Harrington, the Utah Jazz, former BYU football great, and we spoke about drug addiction and his problems with opioids and pills that started when he was a football player at BYU. And I think that there's a correlation between a variety of things in our culture and society and this epidemic of especially the opioid epidemic. One of them I see is in football, and that we see in the NFL even that there are players medicated so that they can perform, and then after their careers are over, their bodies are neglected. They often develop a bit of a drug problem during their playing days, and then carry that over into their post-playing days. And I know one of the most public faces of that is the great running back Earl Campbell. When I was growing up, Earl Campbell was running back for the Houston Oilers, and nobody could stop Earl. I remember him on Sports Illustrated. He had 44-inch thighs.
Wow.
And nobody could stop him, and he got addicted to opioids in his playing days, and it didn't take long afterwards with his body damaged and benefits running out, et cetera. He got himself into a lifetime of drug addiction, and you see a lot of that in the NFL. And I hope to have on the program in the next couple of weeks author Robert W. Turner, who's the author of Not for Long, The Life and Career of the NFL Athlete. And I think that there's a bit of his book devoted to the opioid abuse and but just the NFL at large and the how there are no guaranteed contracts. These kids and young men throwing their bodies away to the NFL, and not for long, meaning that the league's not going to take care of you for long. Another area that I think that the opioid not litigation, there is litigation going on right now, crisis, where it is acute and maybe not looked at closely enough, is in the military.
Oh, yeah.
And so not just football, I'm not blaming football entirely, but in the military, there's an inordinate number of people being prescribed opioids in the military, and there's a close correlation between people with PTSD. Thank you, Alan. PTSD with opioid use. And so I think that, there's often concern that the veterans aren't getting benefits that they should. And I think that it's probably no more pronounced than in the area of drug rehabilitation and treatment. Another area in the news, especially here in Utah, is the effect that religious standards can have on people that abuse drugs, or what influence religious standards can have, and the inability to live up to those standards on a consistent and regular basis have to do with the psychology of someone that then gets or turns to drugs or opioids for relief from that. I'll call it pressure for not being perfect. And I think that
that's addiction stuff.
And we're on the radio here in Utah, and we're here in LDS Mormon culture. Of course, this Utah was predominantly LDS when it was founded, right, back in 1847, and it's changed dramatically. But I think that culturally here, that there is part of that interplay where you try to hold yourself to the higher standard in regard to with the rules with coffee and cigarettes and alcohol and drinking. But I think that, and it's pretty well documented in the news here, that there's a little exception perhaps in the local culture here, that if the medication is prescribed by a doctor and comes in the form of a pill and not in the form of a shot glass over the bar, because personally I don't think there's a lot different between alcohol and opioids.
No, they both end in destruction.
But I think that there's quite a bit of opioid abuse going on here in Utah, and you see some cries for help that the church or churches aren't doing enough to help address those problems. And I don't mean to say that that's unique to Utah, that religious cultural pressure. That just happens to be where I live, and it is the predominant religion in town. But I think the same is true with Catholicism and all forms of Protestantism. It's people dealing with those same things, those failed expectations in themselves. And, we had one really highly publicized case here in Utah about 10 years ago when it was the mayor of Murray, Snar, Dan Snar. And Dan's son died 10 years ago from an opioid overdose, and attributed part of his unhappiness, if you will, to his inability to live up to all of those standards, local standards about what he was supposed to be doing, as opposed to what he actually was doing. And so there's lots of things that influence the decision to medicate your pain with whether it be alcohol or opioids or other sorts of drugs. But I think that there's a lot of things in society that we do that we accept to contribute to those things. And so I just wanted to point out the football, the military, and perhaps even our churches and the effect that it has on people, and whether that feeds the addiction chain more, or what we can do to help break it more easily. And so We're probably running up on a commercial, is my guess, and I'm going to have on the phone here Stuart Goffman, the creator of Addiction Unplugged, and it'll be premiered on A&E television, I think on July 20th. And Alan, are we on a commercial?
Going to it. Yeah.
Okay. We'll be right back with Stuart Goffman. Welcome back to Talk with Ted, episode 31, and I've got on the phone with me, I believe we've got him on. Stuart, are you with us?
I am. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate the opportunity as well. Where are you now, Stuart? You're in Florida or Chicago?
Yeah, I'm in Fort Lauderdale. I live here, and we're going to be filming in Chicago on Monday.
And what are you filming in Chicago on Monday?
So, the episode is Communities in Action, and so we're going to get a bunch of people in the community that made a stand and are helping the addicts and people in recovery. So we're just getting everything together, and it's a little bit of a hectic time before you shoot, and you have to bring all the equipment and 6 or 7 crew members. So it's a big expense to get there, but it's going to be great when we get there.
And this is the season finale of Addiction Unplugged?
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just setting it up a little bit. So you're the creator of a television program called Addiction Unplugged. So,
I am a entrepreneur. I had other businesses, and about 7 or 8 years ago, one of my good buddies in Fort Lauderdale was a very successful businessman and really successful, but he had a raging alcohol problem. And I grew up with a CPA as a dad and 2 grandfathers that were CPAs. So I didn't really have any reference points. And so I thought it was just a choice. And I would always try to help my buddy and say, Paul, let's go to the gym. Let's go to the beach. Do something positive. And he would try. And for like 2 or 3 days, he would, relax with me and, do something positive. But in the end, it's not a choice. It's a brain chemistry disorder. And he would go back to drinking. And eventually he died of cancer. And so I did a lot of research.
What years are you talking about there? How old are you, Stuart?
I'm 52 years old right now.
52. So class 85, high school?
84 in New Jersey.
84 in New Jersey. And tell me again, what town?
Livingston, New Jersey.
Livingston, New Jersey. And with this buddy of yours, was it a high school buddy?
No. This is one of my first Florida friends when I moved down here 22 years ago. And so, it was, this is a different world. I grew up in a cocoon in New Jersey, and then I came to Florida, and, Fort Lauderdale is beautiful, but they still have a partying section of town. And he was, he was an alcoholic. And so when he died, I did a lot of research. I reached out to, detox centers and treatment centers, and they were very helpful. And eventually I decided to start my own, drug and alcohol treatment center. And I thought it was going to be more alcohol and less drugs. But, as you were just talking, the opiate crisis was in full bloom. So, we would have probably.
What years did you have the facility?
2013 to 2018. And so that was, the opiate epidemic was in full bloom. So we would have probably 25, heroin addicts for every alcoholic.
Wow.
And, it's interesting when we'll go back to the opiates, but the alcoholics would come in and they would be a little bit older. Our typical heroin addict would be 20 to 30, and the alcoholics that were as patients would be 40, 45, 50, and they would be in the same group as the opiate crowd, and they would always say, like, you know what, I'm not as bad as these guys. And
which group is saying that to which?
I'm sorry. The alcoholics would be like, you know what, I'm not as bad as, the heroin junkies. So I don't have to try as hard. And, it's I could function, but in the end, whether you're an alcoholic or a heroin junkie, you're an addict. It's just different substitute. I mean, different substance. And so we're not. I was not really that successful with the people that were battling alcohol, but we did really good, very well with the heroin addicts.
What do you attribute that to? Your failure, you say, or not as good with the alcoholics? What do you attribute that to? Because
they were relatively not as bad as the opiate addicts. You can be a functioning alcoholic, but it's very, very difficult to be a functioning heroin addict. It's almost impossible.
What does heroin do to people when it gets to the point where you just need to take so much of it to get high? I mean, are these people out and about, or are they on their backs on their couches?
Both. I mean, there's some people that work to feed their heroin, addict. I mean, habit. But in the end, you're really not going to have a steady job, because you can't. You really can't. And also, if you're doing a lot, you're going to die, because you really need with fentanyl mixed in with the heroin. It's very, very dangerous. And obviously, last year, 75,000 people died of overdoses, and that's an insane number.
That's more than the soldiers in Vietnam that died. I think it's 67,000 or so.
And we're talking about more than gun violence in the U.S., more than auto accidents. I mean, and actually we're going to be we're trying to film in, I don't know if it's Soldier Field. I don't know if it's still Soldier Field.
In football stadium?
Yeah. And that holds 75,000 people. So think about everybody in that stadium. One day, everybody dies. And this is a relatively preventable, death.
And I think that number's gone up about, 10,000 or so a year, the last couple of years? It continues to be on the rise.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, I guess decision whether they should legalize marijuana. And the people that want legalized marijuana say the opiates, the deaths will go down, and the use of opiates will go down. And Ted, you probably know better than me. I don't think it went down in Colorado. I think it went up.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Let me back you up, though. We're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves because you were telling us, you're fine. I guided you there. Let me guide you back. You were telling us about the rehab. You ran that for 6 years, stopped doing that in 2018?
Yeah, so, I dealt with, hundreds or thousands of parents of, their kids that were addicted.
How big was the facility?
We had 53 beds.
53 beds?
Yeah. So it's a pretty nice size facility on the water in Fort Lauderdale. And
Nice.
and I dealt with a bunch of parents. I mean, hundreds or thousands of parents. I went to all the. There's a organization, the Addicts Mom, and that's a mom's group all over the country. I think they have 70,000 members, and that's the moms that either lost their kid or their kid is a addict. And when I went to all the events, and when I would deal with the parents of our clients, everybody was talking about the shame and stigma. And as you said, this is a family disease. So it's not just if you have a stroke or a heart attack, it just affects the family member. But with addicts and addiction, it destroys the whole family. The addicts have to leave their habit, and that means they're going to lie, steal, manipulate, do whatever they have to do, and they have to do it to feed the habit.
Yeah, and then you have the enabling that happens inevitably with every family or loved one, where you don't want to kick people out on the street prematurely, but often that love facilitates more of that bad behavior, if you will.
100%, and it's very, very difficult, to tell a parent, listen, lock the doors and take away the key and let your son and daughter sleep on the street, do whatever they have to do, but they're not going to, destroy the rest of the family. And it's just like you said, enabling is, a natural for especially the mom. Like you can't, they don't want their sons or daughter sleeping on the street. And so it is it's a tough question and a tough answer.
And I think so much of it, too, is related to the homelessness. We've got quite a homelessness problem here in Utah that's really grown exponentially over the last 15 years or so. And I see just at the heart of it, drug abuse and a lack of opportunities for people, young people in particular, even on the other side of that treatment from that drug abuse, being able to get employed, get housing, have work and a job to be able to provide for yourselves. I see the kids out here in a public park in Salt Lake City. They look like they're playing hacky sack all day long, and they have nowhere to live. And I suppose as long as they have their drugs or heroin in them, they're capable of playing hacky sack.
Yeah, and I'm sure they would rather be in a nice apartment with a family around them. But, and it's almost like the chicken or the egg. There's a lot of mental illness that, forces them into the street. And, like you were saying before I got on, all the pain, whether it's trauma or sexual abuse or, there's a ton of reasons why people, have, really deep pain.
Everybody's got pain, right?
Everybody has pain, but if you can manage and process your pain, you're probably not going to abuse drugs. But if you're sexually abused and you're 8 years old or 9 years old, a 9-year-old doesn't have the capacity to process it and deal with it, and eventually it will come out in drug abuse or alcohol abuse. I mean, when I was dealing with our clients one-on-one, they're all sweet kids. When they get into the group dynamic, it changes a little bit, but one-on-one, they all want to get better. They want to have
one-on-one therapy versus the group therapy.
No, I wasn't a therapist, but just talking with the clients one-on-one, just just so I can learn a little bit and be better at what I was doing. They always want to get better, but when you get into the group, and peer pressure, and I'm not going to try as hard. People stay, and there's a lot of reasons that you go to treatment, and some of them are my parents made me, or the judge made me, or I'm going to either go to treatment or go to jail. Well, they're going to go, but they're not ready. So they're going to just
go through the motions, not going to stick.
Yeah, and they'll eat really well, put on some weight, go to the gym, and ready, and in 30 days they're ready to, rock and roll and get out of there. And and a bunch of my clients would tell me, I'm not done yet. And when I'm done, I'll call you up.
Would they do that even after a 30-day stint at your place?
Yeah, it's everywhere. There's some people that are not ready, and and then when people come into my place, when I had my place, they would say, "All right, I'm ready, and I'm going to be open to suggestions." And when you're open to suggestions, you can do really well. And, the better, the longer that you're in treatment, the better. So if they say, listen, I need to get back to work, I need to get back to my life, but I only can be here for 30 days, it's not going to work. You need to say, I'm going to be here until I get better.
Hey, Stuart, we are coming up on a commercial. Can I ask you to hang on a few minutes, and we'll pick it up from there? We'll get back more into the your television production you've got going. I'll be right back on Talk with Ted with Stuart Goffman. Good afternoon, Salt Lake City. Welcome back to Talk with Ted, even though I don't have the right music on. It's the Common Ground music, but it's Talk with Ted number 31, and I've got on the phone, I've got him muted right now. Stuart, I'll have you right back on, but Stuart Goffman, a creator of a reality television program that will be on A&E television starting July 20th called Addiction Unplugged. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the opioid crisis. There's litigation that's just started in Oklahoma, where the state of Oklahoma is suing the makers and distributors of the Oxycontin, those types of drugs. And we're talking about opioid deaths and treatment and just really public awareness to this problem on what some of its causes are, as well as treatment options. And Stuart, have we got you?
I am. I'm here.
You're still with us. So at the beginning of the show, I was talking about the opioid crisis in the military. And in a 2014 study I'm reading here, over 40% of the U.S. infantry reported chronic pain defined as lasting at least 3 months after deployment, and 15% reported opioid use in the month prior to the survey. Have you done any work with any veterans or anything with respect to military personnel specifically?
Absolutely. So the whole point of the Addiction Unplugged is humanizing addiction and recovery. So what we decided to do is like we have one episode, military and vets and addiction.
Oh.
And so we partnered with a treatment center in Tampa, Riverside, and they do a lot with the military and veterans. And, and it's, with all the post-traumatic syndrome, I mean, if you're in war, you have to some extent, post-traumatic syndrome.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a sniper either to have it. I always think of that awful conflict of being a sniper.
Yeah, exactly.
And then trying to integrate back into society.
Yeah, you're seeing things that you shouldn't see. No human being should see what they see, and and it's violent and loud, and so we interviewed a bunch of us special forces. We had one of the I think he was a Marine or a soldier for the Army, and he lost his leg with a IUD, and so they were trying to patch it up, his two legs, and he realized that he was addicted to opiates, and made a big decision. He said, "Just take off my legs."
Oh my goodness!
And his name is Dan Nevins, and he's a superstar. He is
where was he injured?
I believe in Iraq.
And when did you film this episode? This is all just within the last few months?
I think that was in I would say August of last year.
And let me back you up a little bit, Stuart, and then we'll fill in with some more details with folks like Dan. Is your program is it categorized as reality TV? What do you call it?
I would say documentary.
Documentary. I always think back to Hoop Dreams. Did you ever see Hoop Dreams, where they followed those?
Of course.
Right, the two kids when they were in high school through their college careers and their attempt to get into the NBA. I forget their names now. But is it sort of in that vein where you're following some of these folks from the bottom to hopefully to climb up out of it?
No, it's more, we don't want to exploit anybody. We're more of inspirational. We interview a lot of people from, and they tell us the story, the arc from the bottom to the top. So it's more of a humanizing recovery. So people that are not, directly dealing with addiction or recovery can open their minds, and instead of dealing with the shame and stigma and judging, instead of doing that, help do something positive for, and just second chances. That's the basically the theme, and we have a whole season of really great stories of hope.
How many people have you profiled total, roughly?
I mean, at least 50.
50? Just for the show?
Yeah. I mean, some, or it could be a 3-minute interview. We just did My Pillow, Mike Lindell.
Yep. I think a lot of people would recognize him.
Not only that, but he's whether you like him or not, he is doing God's work. He's really not only doing the right thing for him, but he's helping so many people, and I think he has like 1,600 employees. I would say 40% are in recovery or out of jail that no one would ever hire. And not only is he giving them a job, you know, it's very difficult to have an apartment or a car. So his foundation helps the employees to get the basic necessities so you can go to work.
And so his company, you see the ads on cable TV for My Pillow, right? The Perfect Pillow?
Yes.
My first question, did you get one when you did the profile of him? Did he give you a pillow?
You know what? He mailed me 2 pillows, and he said, and this is not a commercial, it's gonna be the best night of your life and the best sleep of your life. And I'm telling you, maybe because I like.
And what's your verdict?
Maybe I'm biased because I really like the guy. It really is great. I sleep like a baby.
Okay, I've been struggling with my pillows the past bit. So I'm gonna log on and check out the Perfect Pillow.
I'm telling you, it's really, and just to walk around in his manufacturing facility, it's really interesting, and the growth of his I guess company and his story is just unbelievable.
And I find the bit about hiring the folks with the criminal records interesting too, because once you get hit with that felony conviction, it shuts so many doors for so many people that there's no hope left once you get out of jail and you've done your time and you've paid your debt to society. There's still no doors to be opened. And I think it's important that corporate America, guys like Mike, do that. And like, I think that's as important as the acute rehabilitation centers themselves for continued sobriety, is that opportunity and that being part of a group, of family, being able to work and have a place to live and care for yourself.
I 100% agree. And before I went on, I was listening to you talk, and you're right. Employment is, I think, the number one factor, whether you're going to go continue to go up or possibly relapse. If you have a job and you feel confident and you're making strides and going to meetings and doing everything that you can, and have a job that you can feel the self-worth returning, that is really, really important for people in recovery.
And I think that we have factors here on the outside that are making it more difficult for young people to kind of have that hope. One being the incredible price of housing. Here in Salt Lake City, it's gotten out of control, the price of housing and apartments, and there's a housing shortage. But, it's a multifaceted problem to get people integrated where they do have hopes and dreams for themselves, because it's not the same world that we grew up in, Mike, when, or Stuart, I'm calling you Mike, when you, my parents didn't have a lot growing up, but they could afford a house and a roof over our head and some basic medical care. And now I think young people feel like they can't even get that.
I agree. And, I'm in, Broward County in Florida, which is Fort Lauderdale, and, south of us is Miami, and north is Palm Beach. And it's very, very crowded, and just like you said, it's a housing shortage. So, these landlords can say, you know what, why would I take a chance with someone that has a rap sheet or has a drug in their past? Might as well go to someone else. And, you're right, it's a huge problem.
Hey, let's go back to your shooting of this grand finale. We're coming up on the top of the hour break, but you were talking about going to Chicago, celebrating a bunch of people in the community there that are doing their part to help address this opioid and drug crisis?
Yeah, so we're going to meet a 5 gentlemen, very wealthy gentlemen that put together all expenses paid. It's almost like a non-for-profit substance abuse center, and they're absolutely giving back. And actually, we are also.
Is it a grand opening?
No. It's like 25 years, and so we want to
Gotcha.
highlight people that are making the difference. And it's easy just to take care of your house and your family, but it's you do a little bit more, and to help people that are not as fortunate. And so we want to highlight people that are doing the right thing and the blueprint for something that is doing great things. And actually, we are going to interview the Attorney General of Utah, Sean Casey.
John Reyes?
I'm sorry. Reyes. I'm sorry.
Yep.
He's doing great things in Utah, and we have the opportunity to film him and interview him. And
can you be a little more particular about what he's doing for our Utah crowd?
Well, he one of his pillars is the opiate epidemic, and also he's really big on the human trafficking.
Yeah.
And so these are great causes that he is very passionate about, and I spoke to him for about 3 hours. And he is really, he's a accomplished guy, and he wants to help, and he's really, it's nice to meet politicians, or I guess, well, he's not a politician, he's an attorney general.
He is. They're elected. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we got some good ones here in Utah.
Yeah, I have a little bit more faith in the government after talking to him for 3 hours.
That's awesome.
Hey,
Stuart, we're up on a commercial break.
Okay.
Can I ask you to hang on again, and we'll take it from the top with Utah and talk about your show again.
Okay, thank you.
Be right back.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Not Coming Around. It's Talk with Ted, number 31, Thursday edition. And I've got with me on the phone, Stuart, are you still there?
I am.
Stuart Goffman from Florida, New Jersey transplant, living in Florida for the past 22 years. And you've told us about how you've got into the rehab business in 2012 or so after you experienced watching a close friend of yours suffer through alcoholism and ultimately died from cancer, you said. But that inspired you to get into the rehab business. And now you're out of the rehab business and into the television production business. Is that right?
Yes. It's a little bit crazy arc, but I'm here. I had a... How the
heck did you get into the TV business? Any prior experience in the television production business?
Production, no. Watching, yes.
Watching, yeah. I'm a good watcher too. You a Seinfeld fan?
Yeah. I always like intervention, and I always said, this is years ago, and I'm like, you know what? I would be good. I think I can lead people. I can motivate people. But that was it. And then I got into the business. And based on all my experiences with the clients and the parents and the community, I just had a vision, whether it's a vision or a dream, and I just said, I'm going to go for it. and I was introduced to a director, Alan J. West, and we put together over 18 months, almost 2 years now, the format, and we partnered with some great treatment centers and great corporations and great organizations, and we're trying to, show the blueprint how a community can come together and solve this crisis.
And when you say community, explain for us the different elements of who you feature in this process.
It could be a mom's group. It could be we highlighted some great police departments that are not just locking up addicts. They will, give them a choice, whether you want to go to jail or this is the opportunity to go to treatment. We actually had a episode first responders, and we went to Belamonte Treatment Center in Palm Springs, California, and we had a long time with the Palm Beach Police Department and Fire Department, and they're doing everything that they can to help. They're doing their part.
That's also a profession that can see its own fair share of victims to drug abuse.
100%.
Those first responders.
I'm sorry. We just filmed some. One of the guys that was a firefighter, and also he's retired now, and he was a full-blown addict. And
there was a story here last year, Stuart, where there was a guy down in southern Utah County, and he worked for one of the fire or ambulance companies, and there had been a string of robberies out of that ambulance or emergency vehicle that had those narcotics. And they put a camera there, and they finally caught the young man, and he had the needle in his arm already, the catheter, whatever you do to inject it, on his way into the window into the fire station in southern Utah County last year. So, he worked for him and was stealing from him.
And again, addicts do what addicts need to do. It's not like a want; it's a need.
And is there something about heroin? I've never laid eyes on heroin, but I can't. I've got to believe that it's such a powerful, instantaneous, feel-good relief that it's got to be hard to compare to anything.
You're 100% correct. The first time you do it, it elevates your dopamine levels to a level that you'll never see again.
That you'll never see again.
Correct. So now you're, they call it chasing the dragon. You'll never see it again, but you're going to try. And once you're hooked and it's in your system, it's not like, oh, I want to do heroin. You need it. Just like you need to drink water and
sometimes even food. over that priority sometimes, right? Above food and water.
Well, no, I mean, it's the same thing. You need to breathe air. It's not you want to breathe air. You have to breathe air. It's the same thing. The body is saying, okay, it's the same thing as air. So you have to do it. And if you don't do it, you're going to get violently sick.
Stuart, is there any difference between heroin versus these pills, Oxycontin, or is it more or less the same thing?
It's more or less the same thing. So, if you have we had another episode on sports. and we had Jason Williams from the New Jersey Nets.
Yeah, who was
back then.
convicted of manslaughter years ago.
Yeah, and when you watch the show, when you see his backstory, it's unbelievable that
he's turned his life around, hasn't he?
Yeah, and now he has a treatment center in Boca Raton, and he personally does everything with the clients. They do a lot of venture therapy, and one of the things that we filmed 2 days ago was the clients jumping out of it's skydiving.
Oh, that's awesome.
And yeah, and they do a lot of scuba diving and, just not just traditional therapy. But the bottom line is you have a sports injury, they give you some oxycontins, and you do it, you get hooked. And when you go back and the doctor says, no, you're good, you're going to either buy oxys on the street, or the cheapest alternative is heroin.
And buying oxy on the street, is the dark web still working? Can you still have drugs basically delivered by mail? And if this is outside your purview, you can say so.
Yeah. But that was a big thing, and I don't know if they shut down or they just morphed to another website, but.
Yeah. But it's out there, I suppose. If you want it in pill form, it's out there.
Yeah, but it's a lot cheaper, and economics drive drug abuse and the choice of your drugs. So if you're unemployed, you're not going to do unless you can steal, or if your parents or your wife has good jewelry or antiques, you're going to go with the cheaper option.
Right. Hey, I just want to take you back to Jason Williams. Then was he on one of your episodes?
Yes, he was, and that's the. I'm sorry.
I was just going to fill in a little backstory. So Jason Williams is an NBA player who played for the New Jersey Nets back in the 90s, and before I moved to Utah, I sat at a game next to his father when he was pretty much at his prime. He was the top rebounder in the league in probably 1995 or so. And then it was about that time, it might have even been after a game, he had a party at his mansion in New Jersey. And he had a guy there, might have been a house helper of his, but they were playing with a gun, and the gun went off and killed the man. And it basically ended his playing career. He faced criminal charges as well as a civil case. Did time in jail, I think, for a few years, and admitted to having an alcohol and drug problem. And then that's what he's doing now, is what you're highlighting.
Yeah, and he is if you ever saw him in a room, he has the biggest presence that I've ever seen. He is he has such charisma. And so he basically told us, when he was using, he has his posse, and they would go to bars and do whatever he needs to get high and, have, let's say, fun. But now he got out of Rikers Island.
Rikers Island, New York City.
Yes. And he went back to his, house, and he was just a alcoholic and a drug addict. And I think Charles Oakley and Curtis Martin just basically kidnapped him and took him to a treatment center. And he got better, and he learned what really worked for him and what didn't work, and he fashioned his own treatment center, the Rebound Institute, after what he liked in treatment and what he didn't like. And
the Rebound Institute.
Correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And where is that?
In Palm Beach, Florida. And actually, he introduced us to Chris Mullen. And I'm sure
the St.
you know,
John's legend. I met Chris Mullen when I was in high school when he was playing for Lou Carnesecca at St. John's in 1984. So, yep, I know who Chris Mullen is.
And also, we met Louis, Coach Louis.
Lou Carnesecca.
Yeah, I think he's like 94 years old.
Yep.
He's frail, but his mind is 100% with it. And we highlighted him and Chris Mullen and obviously Jason Williams. And Jason it's interesting. He said people that come into his facility, they're teammates. And Jason is helping them get better, and they are keeping Jason well. So it's a teammate. It's not like, all right, I'm the staff and you're the clients.
Yeah, that's
a really interesting way to look at it.
I think it's got to be tough in professional sports too. That there's more drug problems and people that need treatment that are afraid to come out and say that they have a problem, especially those professional athletes that we hold up on a pedestal that they are supposed to live these perfect lives and they play a game for a living, and who are they to complain? And I think that attitude can have sort of a chilling effect on a professional athlete's mentality on how to deal with their own problems and how to voice their own complaints, et cetera, and how when it's manifested with drug and alcohol abuse.
Ted, what would have happened if you were 18-year-old, 19 years old, and you get a, $20 million contract?
I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. Hey, Stuart, exactly. we're up on another commercial. Let's pick it up right there and when we come back.
You want to...
Welcome back to episode 31, Talk with Ted. Stuart, are you still with me?
Yes.
Stuart Goffman, the creator of Addiction Unplugged. We're having a good conversation here about a little bit of basketball. I always like to try to work in basketball, Stuart, so I appreciate you dropping the Lou Carnesecca references, talking a little hoops. But I was saying on the way out, I think that there's pressure for professional athletes and celebrities, and I know we have some rehabilitation centers here in Utah that cater to some high-profile people that want to kind of sneak in and sneak out and not be seen. And you and I have spoken. I have a little bit of a theory that Alcoholics Anonymous shouldn't be anonymous anymore, that there's some shame associated with that anonymity. And I'm not saying that that would be the correct position for everyone. People are entitled to their privacy. But I think that there's real shame in that anonymity, and that there's great support in those AA rooms, people similarly situated that have experienced similar ups and downs in life and dealt with those things in a similar way, that being turning to drugs or alcohol. But then in large part, once you leave those rooms and the comfort of those rooms, you're sort of out on your own out in the public at large. And I think that it's great that people like you are highlighting, people that have bounced back, had their second chance, or recovered or overcame their drug or alcohol problem, because it's a big problem.
Yeah, and it's it's interesting. When I was on, when I was I was in the pool this afternoon, waiting for this interview.
Lucky you.
And I was talking to a gentleman, one of my neighbors, and he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I told him about Addiction Unplugged, and he said, "Oh, I've been sober for 30 years." So it's out there. If everybody had truth serum, there's a lot of people that are in recovery. Some people, just like you said, own it, and then some people are anonymous. but maybe it's the younger generation. They own it.
They own it.
And oh yeah. I have my personal Facebook, and I have a lot of people in recovery, and I just love. We did a episode in Austin, Texas, Recovery Unplugged, and it's about music and recovery. And what they said is music is the medicine. And, maybe you can...
Now, back in the 80s, we were told that music was the drug with Ozzy Osbourne, and it was going to lead us to drugs and jumping off bridges. But I throw that out there because Ozzy Osbourne is a recovering addict. And
his kids.
And sings about the dangers of heroin and the evil of heroin and plunging the needle in. And but music in recovery. Go ahead.
Well, so the bottom line is maybe you can't process your thoughts. Maybe you can't talk about it. But when you're, doing music and listening to music, the therapist at Recovery Unplugged, use the music as a tool. And even if it's very interesting what they do. They have when you enter rehab, they have a questionnaire. What song makes you feel great? What music? What song makes you think about a great time when you were a kid? So, and when you have addicts and they still have the craving, there's a lot of people that says, you know what, I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. I can't, deal with this craving. And what they do is, subtly they play that music, the one that you identified, and it really calms them down. And as I said earlier, the more time that you have in rehab, the better. And they have a lot of former musicians that were, in active addiction, and they were doing the robbing and the stealing and the cheating, and now they do just the opposite. They want to balance the karma scales. So they have a band that goes to. We filmed them going into a Down syndrome, almost like a community for older Down syndrome adults that don't go to concerts in Austin, and they bring the concert to these people, and it's very powerful, and what they're doing, it's just really, a lot of people in recovery are doing the right thing and giving back and giving double back because they were bad souls when they were in active addiction. So it's great.
Two things: the bad souls. In the opening dialogue here to this show, I kind of talked about drug abuse, the opioid problem, and it arising, out of football, coming out of the military, and even out of some religious pressures. Do any of your programs address anything with respect to religion and its influence on the addict and affecting someone's ability to quit or not?
No, we didn't address religion this season.
It's always a hot topic, the religion button, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I think that it can play kind of a little bit of a double-edged sword sometimes. That it can make us feel worse and worse and worse about ourselves, and in that cycle addiction, having that additional moral standard that you can't live up to is also its own kind of separate hell for people.
I agree, and actually, I heard that, and I was trying to say yes, I agree. When people are on a downturn, whether it's from the trauma or sexual trauma, or there's 1,000 reasons. maybe they're non-diagnosed of ADD or a learning disability, and they have to live with that every day, and they think that they are stupid or they can't fit in, and drugs, numb the pain. And the same thing with if they have a huge hurdle to fit in with the religion or, with their family, and they can't get there, they're going to do something to make the pain go away.
Yeah, and we haven't mentioned the S word yet during the program here, but the suicide word, because that often is the grim end result of a lifetime of struggling with the drug addiction.
Just so I forgot to mention, and thank you for reminding me. So we did first responders yesterday or 2 days ago, and they told me about this, and I don't think it was I don't know if it was first responders in general or police officers or firefighters, but I think last year, I think it was firefighters, more firefighters committed suicide than were killed in the line of duty.
Really?
I mean, that's insane. And that goes back to
and they're
the
underpaid and overworked. Put their life on the line.
Culture. Everybody has to be macho, and when you see things that we talked about military, they should never. No human being should see what they see. The same thing with firefighters and police officers and EMS. So it definitely takes a little bit of your soul every time that you see it. And if you're that macho and you don't process it and talk about it, it will have an effect.
Yeah, and the same is true with any company. Workers dealing, owners having to deal with employees that have drug problems, and there's been a sort of no tolerance position for many, many years. If you do drugs, you're out. And I think that you see that changing in even corporate America, where I forget if I was reading something or maybe if I was talking to JC from your firm, but about how some companies are outsourcing that human resource supervision over those things so that employees feel like they can more freely report their own problems and try to get accommodations from their workplace to address those things rather than just be tossed out of the workplace to deal on their own.
That's a great point, and the tide is changing. And we did a corporate responsibility episode, and there's a huge company. I think it's like a $10 billion company in Northern Virginia, Leidos, and they hosted a roundtable, and they had some great organizations and companies, and I think it's changing. I think that you're not going to just throw away a valuable employee because they have a drug or alcohol program, and I think the other employees recognize that and are more loyal to this company or other companies that are doing the same thing. It's not just like, okay, I'll replace you with someone else. No, it's a family member. You are a employee and a family member, and I think in this competitive job market, I think the corporations should do that, and also the consumers should, buy from these companies.
Speaking of companies, you and I spoke yesterday about sponsors for your show, and dealing with the topic of addiction and it being called Addiction Unplugged. Did you sense any reservation by any potential corporate sponsors or folks that you dealt with trying to raise money for the show, given the content of the show?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting. Everybody is in support of what we're doing. You know, we're putting a inspirational message and positive content, but a lot of people said, I love what you're doing, and we're supporting, and that's it. And you know, I think it's going to be some time, whether it's...
And is it that it's still stigmatized?
Yeah.
That folks in recovery are stigmatized and somehow morally deficient or not reliable, or how do you define it?
You know, it's not that. I think I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it's a huge company. And I learned that they are doing really great things for the employees that we just mentioned. You know, they will not lose their job, and they're going to, you know, if you have a drug and alcohol problem and you want to go to treatment, they will hold your job and almost get paid and everything. But, you know, I was talking to the VP of marketing, and I said, you should let me highlight what you're doing. And the bottom line was like, listen, we do this for our employees because it's the right thing to do, and that's what we do. But we don't want everybody thinking that we have a drug problem at this company. And I'm
interesting. Now they're trying to play it both ways.
Yeah. And I said, you know, I'm 52 years old, and when I was growing up, I didn't care what a company you know, does with their employees. I just want, if they have, you know, if it was a Nike, I want a Nike. If they have great products, I want it. The next generation, the millennium, they are more social oriented. And I was telling this company, you know what? I understand for my generation, but the millenniums, they want to know that, you know, their money is going to a good organization. And in the end, they said, you know, thank you, but no, thank you.
Interesting. Who's your biggest corporate sponsor?
We can't announce it yet.
Oh, you can't announce it yet. I'm asking you confidential information.
Yes.
I should know better, but I'm not an entertainment lawyer or a contract writer, Stuart. I tell people, don't come to me to write the contract. Come to me to fight over what it means afterwards. Have you been involved in any litigation?
No, not knock on wood, no.
Good for you. But there is litigation going on regarding these opioids in Oklahoma right now. And it's interesting. There's many people, I think about every state in the union, 1,600 or so municipalities and tribal organizations are suing the makers, manufacturers, and distributors of OxyContin, basically. And there's what they call multi-district litigation pending in Ohio, and that's where there's thousands of cases, and all of those lawyers want to talk to the same scientists and experts at the company that did those studies on those drugs and approved them. And there's too many cases to deal with that, so they've consolidated most of those cases in Ohio. But there is one case right now in Oklahoma that has started against Johnson & Johnson, and they distributed the OxyContin. And their defense is, hey, it was a perfectly legitimate, legally approved drug that's controlled in its manufacture and distribution, regulated by a doctor's prescription, and that they can't have any control over the ultimate ingestion of it. And there was actually one case in North Dakota where a judge agreed with them and ruled in favor of Purdue Pharmaceutical. But that's what's going on legally for those states to try to recover money to pay for treatment and to pay for those public expenses associated with caring for the epidemic. But I don't think legally that's going to be enough to really change things. And Stuart, we're up on our final commercial. Can I have you hang on for the last segment, and we'll give your show a good going out?
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Durability.
Welcome back, Salt Lake City. 5:43 p.m. on Thursday, May 30th. Is that what it is today?
I believe so.
And I've got on the phone from Florida. Tell me again, what city are you in, Stuart?
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, sunny Fort Lauderdale. Stuart Goffman, the creator or executive producer of a documentary series, I'll call it, coming up on A&E. I think July 20th is the first episode. Is that right?
Yes, it's gonna be great. I'm, like you said, I've never done this before, but it's not rocket science and it's not physics, so I can figure it out, and we're doing it.
How long from start to your first airing, when you first hatched this project, and got serious pen to paper? How long ago was that? A couple of years?
Probably 2 years.
2 years?
Yes. And it's been a long journey, but I can see the light. We're on the 2-yard line, and we just need to first in goal, and we just need to run it. So it's great, to get to this point.
Now,
by the way,
you got a little. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You were talking about litigation, and one of our episodes was Ohio. That was the epicenter.
The multi-district litigation in Ohio. Yep.
Yeah,
and that'll probably result in a big settlement, but it'll be influenced in part by this case in Oklahoma.
Interesting. So we interviewed Governor Mike DeWine, and he was the Attorney General at the time, and he was running for governor. But I believe he was the first one to bring suit.
Oh, is that right?
I think.
Yep.
That's what he said.
Yep. Now there's lots of them. There's a suit here in Utah. Some of the states didn't join that multi-district litigation. It's kind of like a gigantic class action. It happens often with defective drugs. It happened years ago with Vioxx, which was the drug to cure arthritis that caused a lot of heart attacks and strokes and hurt people. And there were so many claims that the court system can't deal with it. So they all get consolidated and kind of put on a schedule and ultimately settled. So I think there's good belief that that case in Ohio will settle, but it will be influenced by a few sample trials.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting issues too about whether the manufacturer is liable. So a distributor is liable for distributing an inherently dangerous product if it's a products liability case. And their defense here is that, well, it's a perfectly legal product, regulated, controlled every step of the way. They may be on halfway decent, solid ground, some of those distributors. The claim is that they were pushing it, encouraging the doctors to overprescribe these medications.
It's interesting. We were talking to one pharmaceutical company, and they don't do any of opiates, and they don't distribute. But they said, we're going to be. We don't want to be. We don't want the spotlight on us. And my reply was, how about you be part of the solution? But I guess with all the lawyers would not let them even consider it.
They're always getting in the way.
Yeah, too many lawyers in the room. Here on the medical front too, Utah, you spoke about the efforts that Attorney General Sean Reyes is doing, and also we've got some great medical facilities and medical insurance companies and groups out here. Intermountain Healthcare is one of them, and they're working, to reduce the prescriptions by 40% is their goal. Last year was to reduce prescriptions by 40%, have education to patients, and real proactive things on the misuse of opioids.
And this is, you asked me about communities in action. Everybody has to come together, whether it's the pharmaceutical companies, the insurance companies, everybody, and the community. I mean, the citizens. And there's a lot of people that don't go to treatment because the shame and the stigma. And if everybody came together, everybody, I think it would be, we can solve this.
And you say they actually don't go to treatment because of the shame and stigma.
Yes.
Afraid to, kind of come out of the closet, if you will, to steal that from the LGBT community. But that's what the homosexual population did over the last 20, 30 years. And I think that it's time for the addict community, I think, to do a little bit of the same thing, to not be ashamed to come out and ask for help. And again, I think that there aren't enough resources, but if employers start changing their policies so that it's not just a death knell for employees, and what you spoke about earlier with, is it Mike Modell? Is that his name?
Mike Lindell.
Mike Lindell from MyPillow. And you explained how his company employs many people that have had problems in the past. I'll put it to you that way. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And, we're just highlighting the blueprint. And I'm hoping that people will see that and see, the good in doing, it's not just like, oh, okay, we have a drug addict. No, because, it will affect all walks of life, rich, poor, every creed, race, religion. It doesn't matter.
Everybody's got some pain, and that's how some people deal with it.
Ted, can I officially be a TED Talk? Because I'm talking with Ted, right?
Yep, go for it. Oh, I thought you had something new to add. That's it, Stuart?
That's it, man.
No, that's my little play on the TED Talks. It's Talk with Ted instead of TED Talks, because I don't know anything. I'm just a lawyer. I ask the questions. I don't know the answers. But I like to bring on to the program good people doing good things. And most of my guests I've spotted on LinkedIn, and that's where I think I found you. And I actually found a woman that works for you, whose name escapes me right now. JC, is it?
Jamie Paulson.
Jamie.
Yes, and she is a superstar and Wonder Woman, and she works for me. I'm very fortunate and very grateful. And
is she Utah? Is she from Utah?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I think she is from California, but she and her husband and 6 kids live in, I think, Park City.
Ah, Park City. She's lucky enough to live in Park City. Park City's a beautiful place. Yeah.
So I'm really fortunate, and she is about the purpose. When you talk about passion, and then you go to the next level is the purpose, and she is a superstar, and she put me in touch with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and your audience, and it's been great.
Yeah, it's fun. I was asked to do this radio show about 6 months ago. I got lucky. I represented a kid with Down syndrome against the Boy Scouts of America, and I got a lot of publicity on it, and that segued into a little bit of talk radio, and And I've had on college professors, extreme skier, cancer survivor. It's not all about recovery, although the past few weeks it has been. We had on about a month ago the assistant coach at Indiana Pacers, a guy by the name of Bill Bano, who was a college coach and has a very public record of struggling with alcohol and having a collapse from it. He's got relations with Lamar Odom, who many people know had problems. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had on Utah Jazz personality, former BYU football player Alima Harrington, who described getting his first taste with painkillers in the BYU football locker room, which led to many years of struggling with pain pills. But those two guys, kind of famous sports figures, if you will, becoming very clean with their stories. Now, you mentioned earlier Jason Williams, the great former New Jersey Net. Do you feature any other celebrities on your program, or is it what else do you feature?
Actually, we have a LGBT episode, and that they have shame and stigma, and the society is still not accepting that lifestyle. Yeah. So again, they use drugs to dull the pain. Yeah. Yep. And it's so
that can also be compounded by religious influences.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we went to this farm in southern Connecticut that was from like 1818. It was beautiful, and they have pigs and horses and goats, and they grow their own food, and it's a safe haven for them. And they get therapy, and they don't have to be on guard. That they can be themselves. And in the end, it's time that everybody accepted everybody, warts and all. And so whether you're a drug addict and you want help, or we had one episode, pregnant and addicted.
Pregnant and addicted is a huge problem.
Yes, and I know Utah has a pretty big problem. We went to the retreat in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they have special staff to deal with the pregnant women.
And then you talk about the pregnant teen too, because that alone is another problem, and shame associated with that.
Yeah, and it's time. I mean, we're 2019, and we need to not be so judgmental, and not with social media and hiding behind the computer screen. It seems like some people are more accepting. But then there's some people that are just really, let's say, mean. And, we're hoping that Addiction Unplugged, changes the narrative on drug addiction and recovery.
Amazing. And tell us how many episodes have you got, and when will they be on?
It's going to be 10 episodes, and we're starting July 20th, and we're going to be in between Intervention. Intervention has been on TV for, I believe, 17 seasons, and it's going to be us, Addiction Unplugged, and then Live TD, which is a great show. I think that's the most popular cable show on TV right now.
Live TV?
It's called Live TD. TD. Police Department.
Oh, PD.
PD.
Police Department.
Kind of a frontliners kind of show?
Well, it's live, so they have I think they have 10. They have crews, film crews, all over the U.S. with the police departments, and it's just live.
Well, it's got to be exciting for you to be on in between those two shows, that long running intervention, and then this new exciting show. So you got to be feeling pretty good about yourself.
Absolutely, and I feel good about myself and Addiction Unplugged. So,
in the last minute that we got here, so you tell me, flower it up, color it up as best you can. Why should we watch your program?
It's all about Addiction Unplugged is about education. It's about entertainment, and it's about promoting solutions. And the solution is everybody getting together. And I don't have the solution, but if everybody accepts people as they are, and sees our episodes, and just do your part, and maybe hire someone that has that was in recovery, or do something. And if everybody does a little thing, it would make a huge difference. And in the end, this is it's not a political problem. It's not a partisan problem. It's a United States problem, and so we can solve it, but everybody has to come back together. And I think that Addiction Unplugged, I hope, is the catalyst for change.
Hey, I've got to thank you so much, Stuart, for coming on. I find one thing about your story particularly compelling, and that is that you yourself are not an addict without a personal story, so that your mission here is really built on that empathy that you feel for others, rather from that personal experience. I wish you well with the program, with season 1, but I'm going to take issue with one thing that you just said here. You said that you don't have the solution to this problem, and I think that you're quite wrong about that. I think that you're part of the solution, and that this awareness and coming out and getting rid of the shame associated with addiction, I think, is one of the biggest obstacles to overcoming it. And so a personal thank you from Salt Lake City for your work.
Thank you, and that was very nice, and I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
And you and I will follow up on the outside. Stuart Goffman, creator, executive producer of Addiction Unplugged. Ted McBride, I've run over on the commercials. I'll be back on Tuesday with a couple of friends of mine. I got an idea to revolutionize the music business. So tune in on Tuesday.